Good evening, everyone, once again, and welcome to this conversation on the occasion of the International Day for Persons with Disabilities. This is jointly organized by the Social Workers in Disaster Risk Reduction Collective and the Sangyan. I'm happy to welcome you all. We have few participants only today, perhaps I doubt, because since it's a UN Day, most of the persons with disabilities have their own programs in their respective organizations and institutions. However, it is an important topic that we have chosen. I just want to introduce this Social Workers in Disaster Risk Reduction Collective. This is a WhatsApp initiative on the digital platform, which we had started during the COVID times 2 years back. And last year we had online meetings like this every month on different topics which were relevant to the social workers. However, during the post-COVID times, this came down because the online meeting was not very much in fashion post-COVID, and hence we reduced the number of online meetings. However, during the occasion of various international days and observation, we try to conduct topics like this. So this evening, I once again welcome everyone who have joined here. This meeting is being recorded, and this evening we will have Advocate Abhishek Kumar talking to us. So I would like to introduce him, and also would this meeting would be more like an interaction and like a conversation with you, with Abhishek, and also requesting each of you have joined from different places. Whoever is comfortable in switching on their video, please do so. However, it is not mandatory to do that. But we appreciate your presence, and we appreciate your time with us. Please feel free to ask questions related to the topic to Advocate Abhishek on chat, or even if you can unmute and ask, that is also fine. Please feel free. You can grab a cup of coffee or tea and have a chat for the next 1 hour. So this is not a formal meeting as such. We do not have any keynote speaker or inauguration or anything like that. Since 1992, the United Nations has been observing this day, 3rd December, as the International Day for Persons with Disabilities. The world over, 16% of people live with some form of disability, according to the latest statistics by the WHO. And we also have found that climate change is affecting everyone around the world, and persons with disabilities are disproportionately affected due to climate change and extreme weather events. And we are witnesses to it, especially in India. We have seen that the number of natural hazards have been manifold, and it has been increasing over the years. And every year we can see even the latest World Disaster Report also mentions the total number of hazards to have increased, and the hazards which are related to climate have also been increased manifold, and persons with disabilities are affected very much. And in India, we understand the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act, which was enacted in the year 2016. In 2016, that around 21 types of disabilities have been numbered. However, we are yet to have a comprehensive census based on the this RPWD Act, and hence we do not have an exact number as such. Of course, we can refer to the 2011 census, but that is much underrepresented now. So the 16% we can kind of keep it as a kind of a figure of any community as such. So without taking much time, I would like to introduce Advocate Abhishek, and then we can start the conversation with him. Uh, Advocate Abhishek is researching the disproportionate impact of climate change on persons with disabilities. He is a law graduate from the National Law University, Delhi, and registered as an advocate with the Bar Council of Delhi. He is presently working as an NCPEDP Javed Abidi Fellow on Disability. He has presented at various national and international forums, including the C20 India, UN India, UNICEF New York headquarters, uh, COSP 15, Rotary Bangalore Abilities, Climate Justice, Just Transition Donor Collaborative, OP Jindal, and many such institutions and organizations to highlight the intersectionality of climate change and disability. He is advocating for the National Mission on Climate Change and Vulnerable Communities under the National Action Plan on Climate Change and running a campaign, Build Forward Better, to achieve it while mainstreaming climate change within the disability sector and vice versa. He is empaneled as a research expert on climate change and disability on the Global South Climate Database by Carbon Brief and Reuters Institute's Oxford Climate Journalism Network. He is the ideator, founder, and curator of the online initiative, the Sangyan, which works on law, environment, and disability. He also carries out an interview series, Ulgulan Talks, I'm not sure whether I pronounced correctly, to document the life journey and lived experiences of persons with disabilities regarding the impacts of climate change. Dr. Advocate Abhishek is also a person who lives with a visual impairment, low vision. So, welcome, Dr. Abhishek, and over to you. Perhaps you can introduce further, about your interest in climate change and action, and then we will go further with some other questions related to climate action. And today's talk, the title of the talk has been given like this: Without disability justice, there is no climate justice. Over to you, Advocate.
Sure. Thank you so much, Joseph. And first of all, welcome everyone. And yeah, very happy International Day on Persons with Disabilities to one and all, every participant who are with or without disabilities. To begin with, I would like to thank Joe sir as well as the SWDRR team for having me here and planning to have a conversation like this, especially in the backdrop of the Disability Day as well as the COP28 that is happening right now in UAE. And choosing this topic, that how important this intersectionality becomes in this era of consequences where climate change acts, is one of the global concern. Mm, and with respect to person with disabilities, as sir mentioned, that how person with disabilities at global level constitute almost, as per the WHO reports, to 16% or something like that, while as per Indian session is highly underrated, and it comes to 2.2 percentage or something of the population. But even if that 2.2 population of almost 140 crore population is a huge population that has been neglected for over decades in Indian modern journey of the constitution. So in that context, I'm glad to be here among one and all, and I will again thanks Joe sir for planning and proposing this conversation and actually finalizing this. And thanks that it is. I'm glad that it is happening right now. And in this course of conversation, I will be pleased that if we can, at the surface level, at least if we can know how what this intersectionality means, what do you mean by climate justice, disability justice, and how persons with disabilities are often disproportionately impacted, and what is the way forward. So yeah, I look forward to this conversation.
Yeah, Abhishek, thank you for that introduction. So my first question is, what do we understand by climate and disability justice? What is your view? What is your perspective on that?
So to begin with, I would like to, create one picture of and refer to Constitution of India. So if we look into the Constitution of India, the first value system that the preamble imbibes is the justice. After the inaugural paraphrase, which try to define what form of a state or republic India ought to be, uh, uh, republic which is democratic and secular and so on. The value system, when it tries to create for its citizen the first justice, equality and liberty, the first it always prefers justice. And there is a reason behind that hierarchy. In the constitutional laws perspective and jurisprudence, we have justice at the top because we have to prioritize that before liberty or equality or something else. And in that context, if we see, the justice has been conceptualized from the perspective of social, economic and that political. And Dr. Ambedkar in that context mentioned that how why we need to have a social justice first, then economic and political. Just giving, let's say, voting right, or just giving some fundamental rights on the paper, it won't be the enough. In that context, the concept of social justice was first, then economic, because it flows from the social justice. In that context, as during the 1940s, when the constitution was conceptualized and drafted, we didn't have the idea of climate change or biodiversity loss or the planetary crisis. So the concepts like climate justice or disability justice was not very much in the thought process. But with the time, Supreme Court has interpreted justice basically means that you are treating the liberty and the concepts of equality is coming together, and the person with disabilities in with respect to disability justice are not left behind. There is a principle called leave no one behind. When you are actually implementing that in all the aspects of the lawmaking and policy making, be it while participatory at the planning level or the implementation level, we in a way and take all the considerations while planning and implementation of the laws and policies, which being with respect to persons with disabilities and inclusion of them, then it basically means or derives that we are actually practicing disability justice. So be it our social, political or environmental field, when you are practicing those disability inclusion, it basically means it will translate into disability justice, where their due share or the due participation, the fairness principle is really appreciated. With respect to climate change, it has actually couple of aspect, as in firstly, because the person with disability, just like global south, they are actually the people or the community or the society we have actually contributed least to the climate change issue, the global, be it the Africa or be it the South Asia, even the South America, the Amazon jungles, and the people, the tribal indigenous communities, the women's, the migrants, they are one of the communities who contribute least to the climate change, while the developed nations actually contribute because of their per capita carbon emission is so disproportionate high than that of the people from South America or Africa or let's say India. In that context, there is a fight for that when we have not contributed this much. So our responsibility should be in that proportionate. Similarly, while we're talking about climate action, in that context, the vulnerable communities who have least contributed and yet are disproportionately impacted by climate change impacts, so they should be the constituent integral to the climate action, which is Sustainable Development Goal number 13, which talks about climate action. So in that context, climate justice basically means being all inclusive and considering the historical responsibility, not going with the procedural equality principle, but having a equity principle where everybody is treated as per their capacity to deal with climate change, as well as their resources and their contribution to the very phenomena of climate change. So yeah.
Correct, correct. You also mentioned in between about the Sustainable Development Goal number 13, right? Which talks about climate action. Of course, all the all the goals, the 17 goals are can be definitely climate change can be integrated in each of those. However, climate action goal number 11, 13, sorry, the 13 talks very specifically and exclusively on climate change, climate action. So, in fact, the theme of this year's International Day of Persons with Disabilities is also united in action to rescue and achieve the SDGs um, for, with, and by persons with disabilities. So, how does that work uh, currently?
Yeah.
Given the background of the changing climate and all that, so what is how do you want to respond to that?
Sure. So basically, as you rightly mentioned, sir, that how climate change is something that underlines or under also kind of affects every other in achieving every other goal. So exactly this same thought was with the United Nations and specifically the UNFCCC team, which looks onto climate change, as well as UNEP, United Nations Environmental Program. And some 3 to 6 months back, they came with a study which says that it is not just a theoretical thing, but is actually in implementation the biggest challenge in achieving sustainable development goals. When we begin with, let's say, goal number one, which is end poverty. So basically, it's the climate change which triggers, which it acts as a threat multiplier. And when I say called threat multiplier, it basically means that it is not affecting just our health, it is affecting our agriculture, is shaping our migration and displacement patterns, it is affecting our mental health, it is affecting our livelihood and all the aspects of life. So in that context, climate change basically the planners of the SDG goals, they understand this, and that's why they all, despite, let's say, disability is not one of the goals of SDGs, because when the drafters we are discussing this, they thought ki because disability is covered under all the other goals, so let's not have a separate goals. But when it came to climate change, because of this gravity of the problem, they thought that despite being it under all other goals covered, still to make it more bring into the spotlight and highlight the how it is affecting the whole world, the planet Earth. And that's why the president of UN also referred it as a planetary crisis along with pollution and biodiversity loss. So in that context, definitely climate change is something that is affecting all the sustainable development goals. And without dealing, or sorry, rather addressing the climate action, which is basically inclusive of all the communities, from person with disabilities to, let's say, children's, like the UNICEF is basically actively on that, UN Women is especially concerned addressing the issues of women's. And also we need to also understand that disability is not a homogeneous identity, so it has both the vertical as well as the horizontal aspects. So within the disability, if you're saying there are almost 21 recognized disabilities in India under the RPWD Act, but there are also unrecognized disability, there are rare diseases, there are temporary disabilities. Let's say somebody is affecting in, let's say, a road accident or something, or even with respect to the wars that is happening, be it in Israel Palestine, or be it Ukraine Russia, so, or even in the Sudan and Nigeria. So in those wars or conflicts also results in many people becoming disabled, or their disability getting more severe. So in that context, the person with disability is not a very one kind of one straight jacketed formula that suits for all disabled. There, apart from 21 disability that already mentioned, there are other, even in those there are some certain invisible disabilities whose requirements with respect to disaster risk reduction or climate action is very diverse, which are not often taken into consideration because of its invisibility. Similarly, the vertical aspect of disability sector is like, uh, within disability sector there is a diversity, but beyond the disability sector, there's also very rich kind of history or the intersectionality. as in they are women with disabilities. So we are not often looking from the UN women is working in silos at times, let's say for example, or even the Ministry of Women is working silos and MSG is working in silos. So there's intersectionality at the vertical level as well, where there's a children with disabilities, there's migrants with disabilities, there are minorities with disabilities, there are trans people from disabilities. So in that context, the disability has both the verticals of a diversity, and that's why there's need to be very standard operating procedures and with respect to climate action that is very specific, customized for each community, because their concerns, their requirement, the reasonable accommodation for them, the accessibility requirements from them is so diverse. So yeah.
Correct. You rightly mentioned that disability is not a homogeneous community. Um, the first legislation in India, which was in 1995, if I'm not wrong, was the Person with Disabilities Act, which identified only seven types of disabilities. Now, when it when the 2016 legislation came in, they have identified 21 types of disabilities. At the same time, you mentioned about invisible disabilities. We have our colleagues who have who are representing an organization which caters to deaf-blind children, right? Multiple disabilities. So can you elaborate this? When you say that disability is not a homogeneous community, can you elaborate a little bit more on that? Because
Sure, sure.
some of the participants are also new to the entire thing of realm of disability. So
Yeah.
can you break it down so that we
Sure.
understand it better? Yeah.
So when I say that disability is a homogeneous identity, is not an homogeneous identity. It basically means there is an underlying diversity, both horizontally and vertically in nature. So, for example, apart from that, how disability has this women with disability section, the children with disability section, the old adults with disability, and so on. There is also within the disability, there's even in the 21 recognized disability, certain disabilities. Let's say, for example, the old ones that, as Sir mentioned, it was recognized in 1995 Act as well, where basically people with low vision like me, or the people with visual impairment, bracket, let's say blindness. But there are also disabilities like person who are hard on hearing, or there are multiple, politically, or the right way to explain those conditions as mentioned in the schedule of the RPWD Act 2016. But within that, there are some, let's say, blood disorders like hemophilia and thalassemia. Their impacts are not very obvious for the other person, or even the person with disabilities, to look and say that, yeah, he or she or they are person with disabilities. No, the 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 visibility of those disabilities are very different. So one person may look like, or even let's say person with MS, so they may look like perfectly fine when you are looking from the outside, but they still have a disability. And because of the nature of their disability, like let's say for example I'm a blind, then all throughout my working hours or days, it get affected me the same level. But someone, let's say, having a condition called, let's say, a rare disease called IIH, or a multiple sclerosis, they won't getting impacted throughout the day or throughout the year the same way. So let's say a person with MS will get affected by heat wave more, and a person with IIH, because of their brain pressure issues, will get impacted by cyclones more. So in that context, the diversity of the disability is very huge, and it is very complex in nature, that we sh- we can't just have a superficial understanding of that, and then went on to plan, let's say, having a disaster management plan or climate change plans, or even heat wave and cold wave action plans. So in that context, we need to go in detail and look the comprehensive requirement for the diversity and disability, and then customize our plans and programs as per that. Because not every disability is going to get affected or negatively affected by every aspects of climate change. So a heat wave will affect certain persons with disabilities more, and will be, let's say, not irrelevant for certain disabilities. Similarly, the other extreme weather events, or even the, let's say, the climate change induced disasters, won't be affecting all the person with disability community likewise. Just as I mentioned that I have did a case study of one person from Vizag. She's a person living with a invisible disability and called IIH, which is brain related neurological condition. So her condition get affected most by cyclones, while a person from Rajasthan who has let's say MS, because of the heat wave, they will affected more by the heats only. And the person from Kerala that did a case study on, her condition was low vision, and she was getting mostly affected by extreme rainfall and unseasonal rainfall. So in those contexts, neither the all the climate change impacts are same across the regions. Basically, we have almost 5 to 6 broader climatic zones in India, and they have different forms of extreme weather events and climate change disasters, as well as the diversity within the uh, disability sector. When the diversity of climate change as well as the diversity of disabilities comes together, it becomes so complex in nature that we need to have detailed thorough kind of understanding, and have the SOPs and the handbooks for each specific disabilities, and the climate change impacts intersectionality work in a very minute and detailed manner. So yeah.
Yeah, even the terminologies that we use for persons with disabilities. Of course, when we work with the community, especially persons with disabilities, it is appropriate to use the right terminology when we address them. I was having a discussion with one of the pioneers in disability rights in Kerala, Professor Chandrasekharan. He was mentioning, of course, he unfortunately he passed away a few years back. Uh, while we were working with him, he mentioned that many years back they were called as invalid, right?
Hmm.
When they have to get a concession in the train, they have to tick the box which mentions that invalid. Then they started calling them handicapped. They started calling them disabled. Then they called differently able.
Right.
Then the latest nomenclature is the Vyangan,
Hmm.
as proposed by Honorable Prime Minister. However, I think internationally the accepted technical terminology is person with disability. What
Right.
is your view on this, and how we should really call persons with disabilities, according to your
Actually, there's yeah, ongoing debate regarding that. Let's even there are countries which cause people with determination. Then there are people which called disabled people. So in that context, the global understanding from the UNCRPD and other special rapporteurs on disability issues, they basically prefer calling the person with disabilities the best, because we are keeping persons first. Because also need to understand that calling disability community, let's say, disabled people, is also not appropriate, because you are putting their disability first. So for example, I would like to share one of the article and a cartoon based on this. So basically the workplace person call another woman that, oh, you are a disabled accountant. So, and her reaction was, no, I'm an accountant and I use wheelchair. Both are very different distinction and different distinctive identities of me. So, for example, I am a person with visual impairment. I doesn't become a, let's say, a disabled lawyer or disabled architect or disabled in doctor. Is basically, I'm a disabled is a different thing, and I'm an advocate or a lawyer is a different thing. So in that context, definitely, let's say, um, and the person with disability is definitely the most appropriate thing. And also one more point that I would like to add within the let's say the last point that we were discussing, the diversity within the disability community is also one of the, let's say, children is a children, there's a age group, and whoever falls into that bracket becomes a children. Same with old adults or a migrant or a let's say minority and so on. But even in the disability there is also percentage. So basically the rpwd act or the most of the legislations throughout the world have this minimum criteria. So in indian context, when you have a minimum disability of 40%, then only you have become eligible for, the special rights and responsibility of the state towards the person with disability and eligible for them. But let's say somebody is having 30% low vision. In those contexts, or they have issues with respect to mobility, but it is not extreme level. So in those contexts also we need to understand that how even the severity of the disabilities varied very drastically. So somebody can be a person with disabilities with just 20 or 30% of disability, and somebody will have 100%. So when we are talking about disaster risk reduction or climate action, we also need to take this third aspect of the diversity within the disability sector, as not all the person with disability, even let's say they have the same disability. For example, not all person with low vision or all person with mobility issue will have the same requirement in the emergency evacuation or rehabilitation and so on. So yeah, that.
Yeah, correct. That's right. In fact, many a times we take the persons with disabilities as a recognized person with disability only when they get a certificate, disability certificate, which is 40% and above. And when they get some social protection schemes by the government, like the disability pension, which is there by the government of India, and also in all the states. At the same time, there are people with reduced mobility. They may not be falling under this technical brackets. However, they might need certain help while there is a weather extreme event like cyclone, flood, so on. So that brings to the next point, that is the early warning mechanisms, like right, especially when we talk about weather extreme events and preparedness and disaster risk reduction. How does early warning help the person with disabilities? Definitely, to a great extent, it will help. But the challenge in today's world is that, especially in India, whether the early warning messages are adequate. That is one. Secondly, are these warnings friendly to person with disabilities? Are they able to comprehend what the institutions which are mandated to give, for example, the India Meteorological Department, they are mandated to I mean, forecast about cyclones and winds and rains and lightning and all that. Are these reaching out to the persons with disabilities? What is you have
So
you
with
thought about it?
Yeah. So with respect to, there's a principle called prevention is better than cure. So even with respect to when we talk about environmental jurisprudence or laws, we have a very core principle of precaution. So we are not going to get the harm of climate change or other planetary crisis and then going to work on that. So Indian legal system always have this principle of precaution. So we need to be always precautionary, even at the state level as well as the individual level, with respect to when the impacts of climate change comes. And the supreme court of india has definitely accepted this principle, and in its various judgments, and even the ngt act and its judgments also include that principle of precaution. So with respect to the early warning system, which basically strengthens one's ability to take precautions, is not going to serve the person with disabilities community specifically when it is not accessible. And with the advent of the technology so much, it also becomes more because the a sphere in which the early warning systems can be given, let's say 30 years back, was so different. It was mostly using public resources, public mediums like Doordarshan or All India Radio, and door to door going and some so on. But with the advent of technology, especially the internet, this whole spheres become so different. But the one issue that we are still facing is basically the applications that has been prepared. I will give the one best practices of Sachet app. So basically this has been prepared to give to climate change induced disasters early warnings. And the be it the ISRO and the meteorological department and other departments of the government of India have joined together, and they provide early warning system text messages on the app, as well as the normal text message in the affected areas. And like I have been receiving just now that a thunderstorm is there because a cyclone is there coming in the Odisha and Andhra, just to right now while we are talk. So in those contexts, the apps have been developed, and it is very good with respect to how it uses the artificial intelligence, customized messaging and everything. Secondly, it is also using the GIS technologies, and how the geolocation of each and every respondent can be used in providing more detailed and person to person required such things. But some the basic accessibility things are lacking in this. Although good thing is that it uses almost 16 languages. It provides information or the messaging in 16 languages. But let's say it doesn't have all the web accessibility features included. But the good thing is that it seems like the government is in the right direction, and hope it becomes more and more inclusive. And when we talk about inclusivity, it should be not look just from this perspective, where the early warning system is given. But when we talk about evacuation and all that, let's say in Odisha, or the even some months back when the cyclone came in Gujarat, regions of Gujarat, the public transport buses or things that has been used for relocating people before the cyclones or such floods hit the land. So in those contexts, the public transport services, the buses should be always low floor buses, so that the person with different kinds of disabilities can access that. So I also took a case study from Meghalaya. So in that context, the person I was interviewing, his point was that of course the government is taking proactive measures, but one missing thing is when they are, let's say, relocating from certain place to certain place, the buses are not accessible. Secondly, the interview I'm carrying was the person was having hearing impairment. And in those contexts, he also mentioned that how they don't have any sign language interpreters. So these are the some of the concerns of the person with disabilities, as in how the early warning system or the process after that is not very inclusive. But I think in that context, like I the Indian Sign Language, as the department of the government of India, just couple of months started a free service over WhatsApp, and where let's say medical emergency or the FIR regarding that, the sign language interpretation services provided for free. But they are lacking is that they are not including the disaster management or the climate change related extreme events for those emergency services. So if those can be more put at one place, then it will be very good. But yeah, Sachet like apps are better than, let's say, what it was 1 year or 2 years before. But still, uh, as there is a saying called, much we have done a lot of good work, especially with collaboration with the international organizations. But even the CDRI, basically how they are talking about making infrastructure more accessible as well as more climate resilient. But still there's way lot to go ahead, as the population is so huge, and there's a pockets where which is working very good. So be it like Kerala or Odisha, which has a kind of history of regular uh, climate change extreme related extreme events, are have more experience, and that is being reflected in their climate action plans and policies and so on. But other states who are lacking behind, most because of the experience, the exposure, or even the and the plans, or even the resources. So these states need more, helping hand from the center, as well as the other states who are, ahead in those contexts, and they then we can, have that approach which is more disability inclusive with respect to early warning system, and the process follows after that.
Yes, that's right. When we talk about early warning and about the disability justice, definitely it is ensuring justice to the persons with disabilities when we provide them the infrastructure which is of universal design, especially when persons with disabilities are taken to relief centers during a weather extreme event, whether the relief centers are friendly to persons with disabilities. We have Miha Fatima, who is attending this meeting with us. She and her friend, they are from Wayanad district in Kerala. They received a second prize for uh, for introducing or for bringing an innovation of a wheelchair, which is all comprehensive, which has a toilet facility, which has a GPS facility, which has a panic button, which has privacy and everything, all encompassing wheelchair. I also saw it yesterday when they had a science exhibition in Trivandrum. They had brought it, across the state, actually from Wayanad, long way. So such innovation is also key to bringing in inclusiveness in climate change and disaster risk reduction. Definitely, if time permits, Miha can come in later towards the end and talk about her innovation. Coming to the COP28. Now we are discussing about COP28 at length across the world. World leaders have gathered in Dubai uh, regard to talk about climate action, and we can be optimistic in couple of couple of deliberations that they have made, and the decisions they have made to support global south and poorer nations by the developed countries, and loss and damage and all those things are coming up. But my question to you is how COP is inclusive, whether persons with disabilities are invited, are their concerns heard, um, are they brought into discussions on the panel and all that? Do you have any idea on that? If you can throw some light on
Sure,
this.
sir.
And a word to the participants. We will have only 15 more minutes. If you have queries or reflections from your experience, you want to ask anything to Abhishek, please feel free, and you can also post it in chat, or towards the end we can also have a open time. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So before coming to COP, I would like to try to create a picture of the global level as in general, rather than just one COP. So with respect to climate change impacts, almost 190 country of UNGA had made a proposal to International Court of Justice to talk about the state responsibility with respect to climate change, because from the 2016 Paris Agreement, the uh, USA, who is kind of the most uh, important member, walked out under President Trump, the ex that time President Trump, and that makes such a global framework very irrelevant, because USA is one of the most biggest country that give the climate finance. So in that context, when that UNGA resolution came just 4 5 months back, the sad part that it mentioned all other human rights related convention, be it ICCPR, UN CEDAW regarding the women, UNCRC regarding the child rights of children, and so on. He didn't even mention UNCRPD. Similarly, a study carried out in this year again, that talks about how the national determined contribution, we all the countries have to submit their plans and proposals, where like how they are trying to achieve SDG goal with respect to climate action, as well as the net zero and so on, the reduced carbon emission. Out of those countries, almost 140, 150 countries, almost 30 or odd countries are only, even mentioning the keyword called person with disability, including India, which doesn't even mention the person with disability within its indices, the declared indices. And this has been submitted some almost 5 7 years back, but just last year they also amended it, and still they can't find any mention of person with disability, or at least in general a vulnerable community. So the most uh, focus at the international level, including the COP, is basically from the economic point of view. They are mostly talking about the, the ecosystem, the loss of ecosystem, and the second part is mostly the loss and damages. So when COP happened in Scotland, COP 26, one of the environmental minister of the state, I'm not very sure about, when she reached, or the he reached to the platform, the COP event infrastructure itself was not accessible for that person. So she herself has to face so many challenges, the barriers, a lack of because of the lack of accessibility at the COP event. Even during the last COP in Egypt, when COP 27, when the major focus narrowed down to losses and damages, it hardly there's very less concern with respect to the loss and damages of the assistive devices and technologies and the infrastructure of person with disabilities. So during the, let's say I give the case study of, let's say, how during the Katrina cyclone in USA, the person with disabilities population varied from the range of 8% to 14%, but the person with disabilities who died in those Katrina affected disaster was almost 40% of the population. So given their disproportionate impact, not just in the mortality or the death count, but also the effect or the loss and damages of their devices, which becomes very integral to them. It is not just another device, let's say a luxury thing, a cell phone for a normal non-disabled person. These are the equipments that they live upon day to day. So again, I will give one of case study that there's a person that I interviewed. They need injections every week, and because of climate change induced unseasonal rainfall, so the whole of the area was flooded with unseasonal rainfall, and that's why that person could not take her medicines uh, on proper time. And they used to have extra, sets of medicine in their fridge, but because of the, electricity also getting damaged because of unseasonal rainfall, even that backup option didn't work. So in this COP 28, the person representation of person with disability and their community has been relatively better, as in with every COP it is increasing, but it is not increasing at the pace that it is desirable. When the global bodies are recognizing that we are the 16% of the population, and that is only increasing, and when we are clubbing it with older generation and the children who are equally more vulnerable, in those contexts, the pace at which we are talking about 40 to 50% of the global population is very slow. So most of these things are basically at the side events when you talk about person with disability. It's basically the world leaders that comes and they talk about like Germany, France, UE, and so many countries make big commitment for the loss and damages fund. So these are the basic highlights that the leaders and the major people, the delegates and the scientists are talking about. And the other fraternity of that are basically more concerned with the the ecosystem thing. And of course these are very important, because the whole humanity, including the person with disabilities, are part of that ecosystem itself. But the focus on the person with disability is very not enough. uh, with respect to how challenging and disproportionate climate change impact is there. So in that context it is not there enough. But we look forward that when you are talking about climate finance that many of the countries has placed, so there must be a disproportionate uh, disability dedicated climate finance in that context. So a lot of organizations like in India, uh, along with the Sangyan and CPTB, other organizations have come together and formed a network, and they are making a charter of demand that what the COP and other such platforms should talk about climate change and other. So those voices are being raised, but not sufficient to the challenges that we are facing.
Right. So we hope and foresee whether the upcoming COP can have more representation of persons with disabilities and let them not be shooed away with some side event or pre-event like that. And you also mentioned about the additional cost of persons with disabilities during a climate extreme or a weather event, especially their assistive devices. Uh, I remember now, with respect to the 2018 floods in Kerala, the Social Justice Department brought out a report saying that 40,000 assistive devices were damaged or lost. Unfortunately, this assistive devices are not covered under the National Disaster Response Fund, NDRF, SDRF Relief Fund. Uh, Unfortunately, but the person with disability cannot live without these assistive devices, and this would be a huge burden on them to look at rebuilding a house, at the same time also having uh, additional cost for assistive devices to be replaced. So definitely it's when we talk about disability justice and climate justice, it's we have to go a long way. Towards a closing, I just wanted to ask regarding your involvement with the Sangyan effort and also the Ulgulan talks or something that you
Sure.
had mentioned. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes,
What
sir.
is your mission and
So
what are you
basically,
expecting from
yeah.
that?
So basically, for last almost 7 8 years, I have been working with this organization that I uh, founded with a vision with respect to how the time is of essence. That with every, let's say, failed COP or every deadline of the Sugam Bharat mission and so on, whole population of within the disability community or even the more other vulnerable communities are losing out on a bit. So it is not just like it is a, let's say, rescheduling of a movie that okay it will come 1 year later, that's fine. It is basically with every failed COP that is not addressing the needs of person with disability, the children's, the women's or indigenous population. They are facing survival threats for them. And also as the UN itself recognizes that, even the government of India recognizes that how, or the even the IPCC report documented that how every failed with every year the cost of living, the quality of life, and there is a concept called disability adjusted life years are basically impacting them. So despite being not contributing the contributing least to the climate change, the person with disabilities are actually facing eco-ableist responses of climate action. Our climate actions are not all inclusive and taking the concerns and requirements, specific requirements of all the vulnerable communities, especially for person with disabilities. And within that, let's say the children with disabilities and the women with disabilities are further marginalized. So for that, in keeping mind, this organization, the Sangyan, basically meaning taking cognizance in English, I created, founded, and it is basically working to take the cognizance of the issues with respect to law, environment, and disabilities, as well as their intersectionalities. And have a four prong strategy, where in the first we are taking a stock and the cognizance of the issues. Then in the second we are going for the research part. In the third, we are going for the advocacy part. In the fourth, it is campaigning and basically impacting on the ground. And then it is a cycle where we are, when we are working on the last phase, the impact phase, we are again understanding what are our lacunas and shortcomings, and then again working on the taking cognizance what are the other issues, and even in our uh, work model what are the we are lacking. So basically we are working on law, environment and disability, and at present our main focus is basically climate change and disability. And for that we have also launched a campaign called Build Forward Better. And this the name comes from the fact that how we may listen build back better, but one criticism from many of the people working in climate sector is that the past, the status quo, going back to status quo won't solve the purpose, that because that was neither universally accessible, neither it was climate resilient. And that's why there is a need for Build for a Better, taking into all account of all the needs of all the communities and ecosystems. And secondly, the Ulgulan talks that sir you definitely mentioned about. So basically, Ulgulan was a movement by Birsa Munda. He's a very revered figure within the tribal community across India, and he gave a call for Ulgulan. Ulgulan basically means, uh, voicing our opinions in a way that it is creating some change or the domino effect. So in that respect, like I'm being in Rachi, and the birthplace and the movement where the Birsa Munda did this is just 30 to 40 kilometers away from my place. So it had this influence in terming it Ulgulan Talks. And in that endeavor, we bring the interviews and postcard series of person with disabilities and other vulnerable communities, let's say women, children, and old adults, and they document their or share their lived experiences, their journey, and how the climate change is shaping their life. And it is not just about their health, but also, let's say, their cost of living, their quality of life, the how the eco-ableist responses. For example, let's say women with disabilities are doubly marginalized because of their, let's say, menstrual hygiene issues. Because firstly there's a thing called period poverty in our at the global level as well as in Indian context. But when we are distributing the period products, they are often using plastics, and they are again detrimental to the environmental concerns as well. So what is the right balance to that? We just can't let's say in July this year only, we government, sorry, the last year we banned single use plastic in certain things. So we can do that, but we can't do it unilaterally without taking the stock of the needs for person with disability. Because a lot of person with disability who have the gripping issues, they need a straws for that. So we need to find a balance that how period poverty is also being addressed, or the single use of single plastic is also being addressed. But as at the same time we also need to see that how the period poverty, the green menstruation is very necessary, but at the same time how to not overlook the needs of person with disabilities while we are going for this is important. So striking the right balance is very important, is thing that I would like to conclude with.
Thank you, Abhishek. There is one question on the chat by Mr. Hemant Kumar. Currently, public places are facing challenges of accessibility, especially non-metro city. Then can how we can overcome on the health issues of disabled person during climate change like winter and summer, when spine and lower limbs related issues increase at high level, resultant effect on movement and functionality. That is a question. If anyone else has a question, please unmute, or you can also put it on the chat. Questions from my side are not there anymore now. But if the participants have any questions, please feel free to ask. And I have also launched a poll. Please give your feedback through the poll. Abhishek.
Yes, sir.
You can answer the question from Mr. Hemant.
Sure, sir.
He has asked. Should I repeat?
I will read out, sir.
Yeah.
So basically, Hemant Kumar ji asked this that how currently public places are facing challenges of accessibility, especially non-metro city. Then how can we can overcome on health issues of disabled persons during climate change like winter and summer when spin and low limbs related issues increases at high level resultant effect on movement and functionality. So basically that's what I was basically we need to have an intersectional approach at its very core. So when we are talking about the message is very having its own campaign like Sugama Bharat Abhiyan, which is basically focusing on building universal accessibility in three kind of areas. Firstly, the public places, the public buildings. Secondly, the transport, and the third is the web accessibility. And the Ministry of MOEF and CC, climate change related ministry, is basically working a lot on basically EV related buses and public transport, climate resilient infrastructure, and so on. So those ministries are basically working in lit kind of silos, and a building that is, let's say, the MOEF is focusing on electric buses. So if the electric buses are not, let's say, low floor buses and accessible buses for all the communities, even let's say the pregnant women, the children, or the old adults, then the goal of achieving carbon reducing carbon footprint would not be successfully achieved, because we are maybe bringing EV buses, but we are also excluding a lot of communities, and they will, because of the inaccessibility, they will be forced to use the private and other kind of mode of transportation. So we need to keep this intersectionality of climate resilient and uh, the vernacular architecture at its very core. As one of my colleagues is an architect, she has been advocating, and she if I share her point with respect to that, how, let's say, like there is a formality. Even at times the magazine covered a story that how, with respect to heat wave, the worst impact of heat wave is because of the urban planning and the architecture, because they are just copying from the west, and it is basically ignoring our vernacular architecture. So basically, the let's say I will give the example of Kerala. Its architecture basically suited for heavy rainfall climatic condition. Or let's say in the Himalayan belt, the Katkuni architecture is basically suited for dealing with landslides and snowfalls and so on. And we are just creating a concrete jungles, which is also affecting our not just health but other aspect as well. Like there's a study by National Geographic which says that because of heat wave and lack of right architecture, we are losing 50, on average we are losing 50 hours of our sleep every year in India. So to which, beat our home, beat our transportation system, or beat any other uh, um, factors that is include cost of living or the quality of life, they must not work in silos. The Ministry of Social Justice and the Department of Person Empowerment of Person with Disabilities, as well as the Ministry of Environment and Forest and Climate Change, as well as its other departments, shall work together. And also the Ministry of Health, which also started a national program on climate change and human health. So they have a very good understanding of dealing with climate change and human health. But and that's why there is a requirement that I'm advocating for the national program. So under the national um, uh, climate change plan of 2008, there are 8 missions with respect to other various ecosystems. Like some is working for sustainable agriculture, some is promoting for ecosystem in Himalayan rebuild, there's some is working on a strategic knowledge and so on. But there is a need for having a national mission on climate change and vulnerable communities, because their impact get disproportionate because of the three factors. Firstly, they are being subject to greater exposure. Secondly, they are subject to higher sensitivity, and they have lesser ability to deal or the mitigate and adapt to the climate change impacts. For being historically being marginalized, as well as because of lack of resources, and also at times not inclusive laws and policies at work, at place. So in that context, I really agree with your statement that yeah, it is, the health, let's say, is getting affected differently. But for that, we need to have an intersectional approach that takes the, the good, bad, and understand the specific conditions and come up with more and more SOPs. For example, let's heat wave with respect to MS is very damaging. So there is a need to have a SOP just dedicated for how the heat wave is affecting person with MS. And even in those contexts, there are so many things that is being ignored. Let's say there's a WHO came with this concept called disability adjusted life years. So in that context, the climate change is not often considered as a factor that will affect disability adjusted life years. But in the recent documents, the UN bodies have actually included that, and they are being advocating with and I myself being included in that. So they are advocating with the government of India and other at the global level as well, that how the disability adjusted life year, the ecoabilism, those concepts get integrated with the climate change as well as disability sector. And there is a more of, not working in the silos, but working is more cooperation and so on. And as the sir also mentioned in the beginning, that the out of the seven SDG, that there the 17th is basically about cooperation and partnerships. And the theme of this year is basically working with, for, and of the person with disabilities. So when you are talking about climate justice, or the disability inclusive DRR, this can be only achieved there is when we achieve the SDG goal number 17, that is cooperation and partnerships. And then only we can, achieve, be it goal number 1, that is end poverty, or goal number 13, that is climate action. So yeah, hope that, you know
So, Abhishek, thank you for that response. There's one more question from Mr. Kumar Mahavir. Uh, and with that, we will stop the questions as such. And if Miha is ready after this, after Abhishek responds to this, uh, you can come in and share about your innovation for 2 minutes. So Kumar has asked, what are your views on simplification of pedagogy of climate change for the grassroots communities?
yeah, thank you, Mahavir, for asking this, pertinent questions. But I think there is some limitation with respect to how much it can be lowered down, because it is a scientific subjects, and a lot of the resources, it is coming from the scientific community. That is the IPC report. Every big thing, sorry, the word or the pedagogy and the research becomes jargonish because of the complexity. So let's say climate change itself is very big jargon. Many people equate it with, let's say, disaster, but it is basically a slow change over the period of 30 to 40 years. And going at the grassroots, there are many even confuse it with, let's say, weather, that how weather is changing, which is not same as climate change. And in all the things, let's say climate finance is the very big issue right now. The losses and damages, these are not just one words, they are basic, very loaded concepts, and which will definitely make it more and more jargonish. But yeah, what I understand your sense that you're coming from. I definitely feel that our focus must be prioritize use of more vernacular languages, because English itself becomes more jargonous for the country of like India, where not, let's say, only few, or let's say 5 to 10%, 15% people understand English in a very good manner. So in those contexts, how our when the government is coming with reported, let's say NDM is coming with mostly in English at its priority language. Then some documents are being translated to Hindi, and most other documents are not being translated to other languages. So in those contexts, I think it should be starting from translating into, or not just Google like translation, but more contextualized translation, which actually makes sense in all the recognized as well as other dialects as well. So like in Bihar, it is being said that you give in Hindi and English, it doesn't work. There are the Bhojpuri, there are the Maghi, and there's a Mathili. So you need to take on account other languages and regional languages as well. And I understand that in many of the, let's say in Gujarat, there's not just Gujarati, it's also the mainland Gujarati is very different from the what they talk in Saurashtra or Kutch. So we need to take account of all this. And with the advent of, let's say, artificial intelligence and all that, I hope those there will be a resource based which is more loaded and jargonized for, let's say, the scientific community, and then which gets little more sorry the less jargonized and included in the environmental education curriculum and so on, so that the people on ground were grassroots, be it the workers or the community, it becomes more, less and less jargonized. So I understand the sentiment and I agree with that, but I think there's some, let's say, kind of what I can say, the logistical issues with that, because it is ideal to do that, but the process of it is doing is very complex. Let's
Can
say,
I
yeah,
like respond?
yeah, definitely.
When I talk about simplification of pedagogy, it also means that we need to also increase the bandwidth of the stakeholders. Like for instance, in hilly region, they like people had faced disaster, for instance, firsthand, also in that case. So I'm talking about how to increase the stakeholders in that to come up with a better plan, and also in the process simplify the pedagogy.
Yeah, sure. So in that context, I would like to first give one context that I was talking to this one advocate, and he's been working in environmental field for, let's say, 2 decades, and he's very active at NGT. So he was talking about how we understand that at the grassroots level, the people may think that they don't understand climate change. It's because of that, because they don't use the word climate change. They basically use pollution is there, or they use the same landslide is there. So they are talking about climate change without talking about climate change, because they are just talking about one aspects of climate change, and their
Right.
language is very different from what we understand. Also, as you mentioned, the Himalayan regions, I myself has visited that area, and one of the challenges that we came across is that, let's say, the importance of Katkuni architecture that is there in every other aspects of Indian context, their customized architecture. So there are people, despite knowing that Katkuni architecture or the traditional architecture is better because they suit with landslide and the earthquake prone vulnerability, many are going for the concrete buildings because the people are not getting married because of those things. So there are so
Mm.
many
Good.
complexities that even I am not aware of. In the same goes in the northeast regions. There are people who they use the bamboo oriented buildings, but these people are struggling socio and socioeconomically perspectives, as in the people are thinking, okay, they are still building traditional homes, maybe they are poor. So in this context, of course, the more the merrier is definitely the principle here. The more people will come and everything. But in my limited understanding and exposure, I feel the person, sorry, the community at ground do understand that. For example, in my travels in Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Madhya Pradesh, in tribal belts, they may not understand the terminologies and language of climate change, but definitely do understand that how Jal Jangal Jameen, the slogan of Birsa Munda, and which is very core to the tribal movement. They understand that how
Correct.
whatever the climate change thing is, it is affecting them.
Mm.
I have met
Correct.
the workers, Tendu Patta workers, who is working in, or the FRA community, who is basically dependent upon the forest products. They may not understand our terminologies or something, but again, last one example I would have to give, that I was working with one community from Rajasthan that is working on the protection of Aravali range, and because it is one of the oldest range in India and it is not very protected because of the development and other things, they were not understanding the legal things that we were dealing with, but they definitely understand the conservation and the protection and the the importance of nature. So I think, yeah, definitely, even the scientific sector or the legal sector that I am representing, definitely, kind of lag behind in those things. The things become so jargonized, but I think there is some common ground that the committee and it is coming for, because they are, for them climate change is not the issue, but for them the water issue, the soil erosion issue, the agriculture related issues, the lack of fodders for their animal husbandry, those things are an issue. And they understand that something is going, they don't get into so much of jargonize or what the actual concept is, or what is the actual definitions, which we are actually have to face, because we are getting one set of information which is very uh, you know norm sorry very grassroots in its language. But the challenge for us is that when we are going to the NGT or the Supreme Court or the High Court for cases, we have to deal with the legal terms and everything. So when we are talking about forest conservation, we have to establish that it is a forest. We just can't assume that it is a forest and ask for its let's say conservation or protection. That's like I was involved in one of the cases at NGT, where we have to prove that how the illegal mining is causing air pollution and resulting in disease called silicosis. And if you just search for there's a village of widowers, because most of the men who are involved in mining died because of the issue of silicosis. So in those cases, the community does understand that something is wrong and they pass us the information, and then we have to kind of more jargonize in, because the stakeholder that we are working is very, they have to stuck with the definition only. So yeah, I
Thank
definitely
you.
agree with the
Yeah.
sentiment, but yeah,
Mhm.
these are
Tha-
larger policy issues that is
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
beyond my pay grade.
Thank you, Kumar, for that question. Very valid question. And
Indeed.
not only climate change, but also disability has various terminologies, which we already discussed earlier. So we are coming to the end of this conversation. We have exceeded our agreed time. Thank you for staying back and online. I request Miha to come in just for 2 minutes. She will introduce her innovation. Miha, are you there? You can introduce yourself and just talk about your wheelchair. Miha, we cannot hear.
So,
Yes.
so good evening all. I
If
am
it is
Miha Fathima.
possible, you can switch on the video if it is possible only.
So I'm facing some network issues. That's why I
Okay,
kept.
okay, no problem, no problem. Please go ahead. I will share the screen of your wheelchair. I'll show the photograph. You can uh, go ahead. Yeah.
I'm a student of MGM Higher Secondary School, Wayanad. I'm a plus one student, and me, along with another student of plus two, have created the innovation of Divyangan Rath, an equipment which is basically multi-purpose electric wheelchair. That was an innovation for science fair, which is conducted by government for students. So what it basically is, the basic working is an electric powered wheelchair, but with multiple purpose including bio toilet facilities and safety features. So it's equipped with modules like Arduino Nano, GSM modules for wireless communication, etc. And what we are aiming is creating better accessibility for differently able children, especially children due to the fallout of percentage of children in school facilities. So how it works is, first of all, considering the safety system, it is equipped with a panic button. So when the panic button is pressed, it sends signals to the Arduino Nanos and sends message to the registered mobile number. We can register multiple mobile numbers, including parents and teachers' numbers. So there's an alarm in the wheelchair. The message will be sent by including the location, the lifetime location of the wheelchair, you tracked by Neo 6M GPS, along with the current status of alarm. So if the location is not easily reachable by the recipient, by the parent or the teacher, they can turn on the alarm in the wheelchair using commands from their registered mobile number. And the alarm will turn on, and due to the reason of its high frequency voice, the nearest people can reach to the wheelchair and help out with them. And after getting the response, they can turn off the alarm from the recipient's phone number itself just by using SMS. We have programmed it using Arduino, the open source software. And another feature, lifetime GPS tracking. Rather than just creating, we can make the alarm on that's automatically receiving the location. But rather than changing the location, we can just give the command location to get lifetime location of the wheelchair. Along with that, we have installed lifetime visual monitoring using RJ45 supported cameras. We have with we have equipped with lifetime visual monitoring too, and it's a self-navigation system used joystick monitoring controlled with electric switches, electromagnetic switches such as relay. It also includes amenities like lighting facilities, privacy curtains, foldable tables, etc. So what the basic need is ensuring the safety of a differently able child while providing all the basic needs necessary for them to use school facilities. Mainly we are aiming the children, can be also commercialized and used for grown-ups. So that's what the Divyangan Rath plan is all about.
Thank you, Miha, for that wonderful innovation. We give a round of applause actually for your care and concern for the persons with disabilities. She was here in Trivandrum yesterday. I was also able to see this wheelchair. We hope this is a prototype. We hope that some companies, some CSR or some other funders can take this concept, and we are looking for patent also. So we hope this will help persons with disability, especially after a disaster when they are in a relief camp or so. Thank you, Miha, for that wonderful work. Many such young people can come up with innovation which can change the lives of persons with disabilities. So thank you. We are coming to the end of the session, a conversation that we had with Advocate Abhishek Kumar on the occasion of the International Day of Persons with Disabilities, that is today, 3rd December 2023.